Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Mary Kay book on people management. I'm really excited because today we're covering three really amazing chapters, and it really gave me a lot of insight to Mary Kay, the woman, and how she thinks. Chapters 10, 11, and 12. And I'll just tell you the titles of the chapters super quick. Chapter 10 is People Will Support That Which They Help to Create. Kind of like build the field and they will come, right? All right. Chapter 11, an open door philosophy, which was very important to Mary Kay. And chapter 12, help other people get what they want and you'll get what you want, which of course I thought was very appropriate. So let's talk about chapter 10 first. People will support that which they help to create. And the quote that the chapter starts out with says, people involved in the decision-making process are more likely to accept change and support new ideas. Involving them means soliciting their advice, listening to their comments, and inviting them to participate in implementation. And every time you see a company of any kind changing everything, everyone's adverse to change, right? We are like, no, don't change that, whatever, lipstick, or don't change that, whatever. And so we have to sometimes realize that our company, like many companies, they really look at what's in the best interest of our customers and us. But it doesn't mean that we still like the change, right? Okay. So in this chapter, one of the things that Mary Kay talks about, she says, um, she was talking about how she was talking to a CEO of a company and how he was saying, Mary Kay, I need to leave this company. They were making all these changes. And because they invited an executive panel, like, air quotes, executive panel, and he wasn't on the executive panel, he felt his opinion didn't matter. And so he did, because of that, he didn't feel like he had a say. And when they came in with changes, he was resistant to the changes because he wasn't allowed to give his input. So he ended up resigning from the company. So Mary Kay says, I couldn't help but conclude that the real problem was that he had not been asked to participate in the change. Had he been a part of the committee, I felt he would have been supportive. He was a bright young man who probably could have made a valuable contribution to the company, but instead, his apathy was driving him to quit his job. It says, a good man's ego had been bruised. Everyone has an ego, and like it or not, every leader must consider this fact before making any decisions involving the people who they work with. And then she goes on to talk about another company that flew all their executives first class, but the company was really facing some budget issues. So they went to all the executives that fly first class and said, how would you feel if we didn't allow the executives to fly? Or better yet, their idea was we'll have the top executives be able to fly first class, the company pays for it, and all the other executives, like level A, level B, and all the executives said that'll make us feel like we're divided. Some are better than others. So we don't want to do that. So the company came back and said, okay, well, what do you suggest? And what was great is they chose to, because a lot of them were very adamant, not to get rid of first class flying for the executives, but the executives actually came up with a lot of ideas that would have saved them a lot more money. And it says in here, the survey they took had served as a dramatic imperative to the executives that they must reduce company overhead. As a result, many of them offered alternative ways to cut costs. In fact, their suggestions presented much greater savings to the company than they would have had they eliminated first class flying privileges. So it just goes to show you that sometimes brainstorming and getting other people's input that you want them part of the goal, it can be really key. Um, then Mary Case talks about when change is necessary, the way in which you present your case may make a world of difference in the kind of reaction and the results. Now, think about this when Mary Kay changes something like the skincare or the miracle set or whatever, right? So all the times our customers are like, wait, what? And they stock up on stuff, which is not a problem, but you want them to feel like this is in benefit of them, right? So Mary Kay goes to say, by involving others in the decision, by listening, that's a key part, listening. You can not only avoid bruising egos, but you can raise their levels of self-esteem as well. She said, however, there is a downside to personal involvement. The more people who are consulted, the greater the chance that confidential information may be disseminated outside your organization. Plus, increasing the number of those involved is also more time consuming. So implementation of the change may be delayed. So there's a huge trade-off in that. And I know when Mary Kay probably, I want to say 8 or 10 years ago, they wanted to rebrand the entire starter kit experience. So they reached out to top directors all over the country and they put us in focus groups of no more than 6 people. We got there, they gave us lunch, they gave us beverages. We were there for probably 4 hours. And they said, so what do you think about this? Do they need a flip chart? Do they need samples? Like, what do you think about the box that it comes in? This is the feedback we're getting. So they gave us kind of open season to go crazy on our ideas. But then they would tell us, well, this is what we're hearing in other parts of the country, because I'm in California. And they then got our input. And then it was probably a year later when they came out with, and then they reached out to like the $1 million directors for their final say kind of thing. But it was really interesting. And it says, more people who are consulted, the greater the chances that confidential may, we already said that, sorry. So then she also talks about how people naturally resist change. And they had an audience of 50 sales managers. And the boss went in and said, guess what? We're changing your percentage from 2% to 1%. And they're all like, what? You're cutting our pay in half? He goes, yes, but you get to choose one of these four prizes every time you recruit somebody for our corporation. And all the sales managers were like, and this one woman stands up and says, you're cutting our pay in half and you want us to get excited about one of these four gifts? I'm done. And she walks out. Everybody got up and followed them. So then they freaked out and realized, okay, we're going to put it back in the system that everybody gets their 2%. But by then, the sales force of these sales managers had felt like they had already been kind of mistrusted. And so they all didn't come back, which is one of those things. It says the conference had begun on a Friday, was scheduled to last through the weekend. The owner flew back to Texas. Over the weekend, he went back to the original 2%. And it says, anyway, it went on and on to describe kind of what happened. So then Mary Kay talks about seek support from all those affected. Now, this is super important because Mary Kay decided, this was years ago, that they wanted to elevate the team leader position and come out with a consultant car. At that point, only directors had been able to earn cars. And then so they talked to the nationals and they decided to come out with this car program so that consultants like myself, I earned a car before I became a director. Um, and so when they have that, all of a sudden, some of the sales directors kind of took it as a threat. Like, wait a minute, why would you promote a car to someone who's not a director? And so it was kind of misunderstood. So when the company went back in and then trained and not trained, educated the sales directors on what this program was, then they were behind it 100%. So sometimes you got to get them to be a part of that by engaging, right? Mary Kay says people want to feel that they have contributed to those things that affect their lives. When they don't, they feel slighted and manipulated. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're thinking about changing things or implementing things that sometimes your clientele, your team might have a different spin on things, right? She talks about seeking support from above and below. That means reach out to your sales director, reach out to your national. I usually don't suggest that you, especially if you're unhappy with the change, don't call everyone on your team and start having your own private pity party. And I don't mean that to be condescending at all, but sometimes if I hear of a change, I don't call the other directors and go, I don't like this change. Do you? And she goes, no. And I go, great. Let's whine together. And you just create this typhoon when that's not going to be a positive thing. If anything, it's like, how can we put a positive spin on this? Because the company, at least our company, never makes a change that wouldn't be in the benefit of us and our customers. All right. She talks about women and women in the sales force and how that's kind of just kind of a different thing. Now, this book was written, let me go back and look at the exact date when this was originally written. Mary Kay's book on people management. Well, this version was written in 2019. So it's not as old as the original. And I'm looking for a date here on the original and I don't see a date. Maybe it's 1970. Nope, I don't know. Anyway, but that's why some of these thoughts are not as progressive maybe as it is now. But she says a comment at Mary Kay, we do carefully consider change. Furthermore, we know that people react favorably to whatever changes they help to create. Even though today the Mary Kay Independent Sales Force is one of the largest in the world, we make every effort to enlist the members' full support before introducing a new product or a new program. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. All right, number 11, which was chapter 11, super important in Mary Kay, open door philosophy. The quote is, experience has taught me that people will never follow anyone else unless they feel that a leader really cares about them and their problems. Now, with that said, we are not counselors, we are not therapists, and I know sometimes you just need to vent, but your director is not the person to call and get marital advice from or whatever. But she talks about having an open door philosophy, and she says how it's people treat people, and she said in Mary Kay corporate, they've never had titles on doors. Like it never said Richard Rogers, CEO, or Mary Kay Ash, chairman of, like they just never had titles on their door. They had their name. And she said they never wanted to have titles because that's just that's just not the environment Mary Kay wanted. Um, so she goes on to share, she says, oh, so this is kind of interesting. So she received a call from a young woman in Michigan, and this is back in the day when Mary Kay occasionally would take a personal phone call. But she tried to find out what the admin people were trying to find out what the issue was and whether they really needed to talk to Mary Kay or if they could talk to one of her assistants. So this woman said, "I really need to talk to Mary Kay." So they put the call through, and she says, "Mary Kay, yes, this is Mary Kay. Is there something I can do for you?" "Mary Kay, I'm depressed," the caller said. I asked, "Is anything wrong? Is everything all right with your family?" "No, no, nothing like that. I'm just not doing well in my business." Mary Kay says, "Well, we talked for a while, and finally I told her, here's what you're going to do. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to have a special contest just for you. I want you to book 10 beauty shows. That's what they used to call skincare parties or whatever back in the day for the next week. And after you've held them, I want you to call me back and tell me how you did." And the girl goes, "10 shows?" "That's right," Mary Kay says. "I want you to call each hostess in your date book and say that you talked to Mary Kay herself. Tell her that I've established a contest just for you, and then let her know how much you want to win. Finally, ask her to be a hostess next week." Based on what she told me, I knew her problem. She was giving only one or two beauty shows a month. She said, "I also knew that former hostesses would be the most receptive to her request, giving her a better chance to book more beauty shows." So she went on, "Mary Kay, I'll try my best, but I just haven't had much luck." So the girl's kind of not seriously taking Mary Kay's advice, in my opinion. And Mary Kay says, "You'll do fine," I assured her. "Now remember to tell them about the contest and that you just talked to me. I'm expecting you to do well, and I want you to call me back so I will know things are going. Good luck." At the end of the following week, the woman called Mary Kay back to report she had $748 in sales. Now, this is like decades ago, you guys. That's a ton of money. And she says, although it was not among the highest sales recorded that week, it was by far a record for that particular woman. Even though she didn't book all 10 shows, she was elated and seemed to be snapped out of her depression. So it just goes to show you activity is the cure for frustration, everything. Mary Kay says, anytime a consultant says, "I want to quit," she says, "Great, hold 3 parties and then come back and talk to me if you still want to quit." And once they do 3 parties, they make money, they have fun, they, engage with other people, and then they don't want to quit. So Mary Kay also talks about a good leader should be part of a team. And she talks a lot about how before I could just say another word, this gentleman, it's a whole story, but he says, "Let's get one thing straight. Just because we work together doesn't mean that we socialize as neighbors." So what happened was this guy was driving in this neighborhood, saw his boss, pulled up and says, "Oh my gosh, how exciting is this? We're neighbors." And I just lived 2 blocks away. And this is literally what the neighbor said to him, who was one of his supervisors. Before I could say another word, he said, "Let's get one thing straight. Just because we work together doesn't mean that we socialize as neighbors. I never socialize with a subordinate. So it will be much appreciated if you don't stop by in the future." Mary Kay, this man was telling Mary Kay the story. "I was absolutely devastated. And although he acted as if nothing had happened when I saw him at work the following Monday, I had lost all my enthusiasm for the job." So it just goes to show you that those things are important. Then Mary Kay says, "I deeply care about the people with whom I work at our company. Unlike many executives whose own insecurities make them feel uncomfortable about expressing warm feelings toward their associates, I don't believe in hiding mine. When the top executive of a large company feels that way, it filters down throughout the organization. For example, when I come to work each day, I always speak warmly to the security guards and to everyone else in the lobby. Even though our company has grown so large that I can no longer call each person by name, I have a warm greeting and a smile for everyone I meet." It's kind of going back to that chapter of Make Me Feel Important, right? And then Mary Kay goes on. So then what's really cool is think in terms of what's good for the other person. Then in the section here, it's called timeline. And there are pictures of Mary Kay in 1963 starting the company. What are some of the pivotal things is in 64, it became one of the first cosmetic companies to introduce an actual line of skincare for men. That was 64. And in 69, they established the career car program and gave away the first pink Cadillacs. 1969. So there's a lot of really cool things in here. There's pictures of Mary Kay going public on the New York Stock Exchange. The Drug Selling Association in 1976 and Mary Kay Ash was um, presented her in the Hall of Fame Award. She was also listed in the New York Stock Exchange in 76, and she won the Horatio Alger Distinguished American Citizen Award in 1978. So there's all these great stories, all these things that Mary Kay did. She returns privately in 1985. Um, the World Almanac of Facts names Mary Kay Ash as one of the, quote, America's 25 most influential women in the world. So anyway, these are really cool just to see all these beautiful pictures. It goes all the way up here where it says 2001 that Mary Kay passed. So that's right there in the center of the book. It goes on to 2004 talking about how many countries we're in, the Mary Kay Foundation, and all the products we now serve globally over 40 countries in 2017. And then 2018, there's 3R manufacturing plant. All right, last chapter. Help other people get what they want and you'll get what you want. Now, to a lot of companies, this just seems so backwards, right? And some of you might be thinking about your current jobs, if you work outside of Mary Kay. So it talks about how the most important justification for being in business is service to others. How can you serve other people? So those who are watching this video, when you think about, well, I don't like to sell, I don't want to sell anything, you're not selling, you're providing a service, an opportunity to pamper a woman with knowledge. Even if you're new, you know more than she does, trust me. If you know the 4-in-1 cleanser does 4 things, all she knows is it's a cleanser, and she may not even know that, right? So she goes on to say how every new business must be built upon this premise. Since wanting to make money or desiring to dabble in a favorite pastime is not enough to sustain a venture, the business must fulfill a need for you, whether you volunteer to pay for private school for your kids or grandkids, or you want to fund, you tell your significant other you're paying the mortgage, whatever it is, when you make that commitment, you'll be amazed what rabbits you can pull out of a hat, right? So Mary Kay talks about how everyone's job should focus on that goal. So leaders' first concern must be in helping others. And then she goes on to talk about independent sales directors. When they asked me to autograph a $1 bill as an award for their independent consultants, next to her name, she writes Matthew verse 25, 14 through 30, which is the parable of the talents. It tells us to use and increase whatever God has given us, and that when we do, we shall be given more. I deeply believe in this philosophy, and I've always applied it throughout my business career. And then Mary Kay says, when Mary Kay began, I wanted to create a company that would give women an opportunity to accomplish anything they set as their goal. It was equally important to create a product that would help people. Our skincare products do help women to look beautiful on the outside and to feel beautiful on the inside. I believe that if these two dreams could be applied, we would be successful. I believe so strongly that helping others was the most important motivation for starting a business that I completely ignored the advice of both my accountant and my attorney. My accountant looked at my financial projections and says, Mary Kay, your commission schedule of 50% is never going to work. It's only a matter of time before you go bankrupt. Her attorneys gave her the same advice. Mary Kay, you have no experience in the cosmetic industry. You're a grandmother. Don't throw your life savings away on this idea. They were my financial experts, so I attentively listened to their advice, but I decided to go on. I wasn't being stubborn, far from it. I simply believed so strongly that helping others was a valid business principle, and I was willing to stake my entire future on it. And I'm just so impressed with that. She also talks about sales directors help their teams to succeed. Our culture encourages each person to help others in order to climb the ladder of success. The individual who thinks only, what's in it for me? Remember how I talked once about you go into a skincare party with dollar signs in your eyes? Not only is everyone going to pick up on that, but your sales will be zero and it's not going to be a good experience. So instead, you'll never make it in our company if that's your philosophy of what's in it for me. We truly believe that if you help enough other people get what they want, you will get what you want. In my view, the people who are the most successful are those who have helped the most people grow. And I know Carol Anton used to have a quote, and I always mess it up, but I'll try to. It says, "Your paycheck is in proportion to the amount of joy you brought into the lives of other people," or something close to that. Anyway, so Mary Kay talks about how it's unfortunate when a company puts its people in such a position. In the long run, everyone loses, including the company. While there are still options, smart people should avoid entrapment and seek a company that encourages its people to help one another, and thus enabling everyone to find fulfillment in his or her work. She talked about how there was another woman who was in her 50s who had a really difficult time relocating. And when she relocated, her manager literally wouldn't work with her. And so she talks about today's female manager, this is interesting, is too often painted as thoroughly calculating and absolutely ruthless, clawing her way up the corporate ladder and stepping on everyone in her path. Sometimes she is said to behave in this way because she feels insecure in a man's world. She's always on guard, always feels threatened. I think this image is unfair to women. Unfortunately, because it's still rare for a woman to be promoted faster than a man, everything else does in her job is accentuated. In my opinion, a hostile company environment will bring out undesirable qualities in both men and women, right? When a woman plays by the rules that men have set, as she usually must, her behavior is observed more carefully. Quote, but a woman is not supposed to behave like that, unquote. You might hear from men as well as women, to whichever extent each criticism is justified. Anyway, so then she goes on to talk about how nice guys finish first. And she talks about how the media distorts like CEOs and saying, well, CEOs are money hungry. They do this, they do that. But she talks about movies. She goes, consider the managers portrayed in movies like 9 to 5, Silkwood, Norma Ray. Loudly and clearly, the message comes across: success and decency don't mix. It's the bad guys who manage business in America, with or without smoking cigars. And then she goes on to say, regardless of personal experience, the American public still perceives those who have climbed to the top of the corporate ladder with an unflattering abstraction. I believe this is a distortion of the truth. I personally know dozens of highly successful CEOs of major corporations, and the majority of them are honest, compassionate human beings. I truly believe that decent people are far more likely to succeed than the scoundrels and the bullies. And then she goes and talks to this one man and says, do you know the president? Do you know anybody who's a successful CEO? And the guy goes, yeah, I know the president of ABC. And he goes, well, what's he like? And he goes, oh, he's a total good guy. He's really a great guy. And she says, that's my whole point, right? She talks about a good leader's success is reflected in the success of her people. And she talks about how leaders avoid saying no because they don't want to hurt anybody. But sometimes saying yes to everything doesn't help the person you're trying to help. You know what I mean? Like if you do too much for them, it's like when Mary Kay, she didn't micromanage that woman who called her and said, Mary Kay, I'm depressed. And Mary, this is great. Go book 10 parties to be held in the next week and a half. And so she didn't explain to her how to do it. She didn't coddle the woman. She says, call me in a week, tell them about the contest, and I know you can do it. And so it wasn't like Mary Kay was making it easy for her. It says within well-operated growing corporations, good leaders can only prove their worth by helping others. And so that was one of the things that was super important to Mary Kay. She talks about this parable about Canadian geese. And one year when the Canadian geese came to this Canadian village, they were having a really, really late spring and everything was still frozen solid. And they knew the Canadian geese would not land. So they built all these shelters and put all the stuff down. So all the geese landed. They loved it. They ate because they kept feeding them in the spring and the summer and in the fall when they're not supposed to be, right? They can scavenge their own food. By winter, the Canadian geese had put on so much weight, they couldn't fly away. So then the townsmen had to keep feeding them year round because they made it so that they weren't able to leave. So there was no struggle. There was no, which, is kind of the reverse of helping too much, right? And this is the last thing I'll share. As I mentioned, the ultimate award given to our top salespeople in our organization is a large diamond-studded bumblebee. We think the bumblebee is a perfect symbol because, as aerodynamically engineers proved many years ago, the bumblebee cannot fly. Its wings are too weak and its body is too heavy. Fortunately, the bumblebee doesn't know that and goes right on flying. At Mary Kay, we teach people how to spread their wings and fly on their own. I can't think of a better way to help people. And that is the end of chapter 12. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. Keep reading. We're going to be doing 3 chapters next week. Thanks for being on.